What's up, guys? My name is Veronica, also known as Coach V, and I am your host for the Oversharing podcast with Live the Dream Media. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Oversharing podcast. I am your host, Veronica, also known as Coach V. And by the time you guys listen to this episode, I will be booty up in the sands of Mexico. I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. We did have a pre-recorded episode for you guys for the week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share to somebody that you think will be happy or able to learn from this new episode, this new experience, this guest that we have on today. We are super excited to be here with you and share a bunch of knowledge about something that is important to everybody to address in their life. So we are going to get to our special guest in just a moment. We're going to cut to a quick sponsorship break and we will be right back. All right, guys, you guys know that I have been gluten-free for a few years now. It was a hard transition at first, but that all changed when I met the owners of Gourmet Girls. They are amazing. They are located on North Oracle Road. They have a full gluten-free menu as well as an amazing bakery. I love their biscuits and gravy. And if you have a little bit of a sweet tooth, you gotta go in and check out their gluten-free cupcakes. Mine is definitely, my go-to is the carrot cake. And Ernie knows that when it comes to holidays and birthdays, he's got to go over there and get myself a sweet treat. They've got sourdough, pizza dough, gluten-free almond flour tortillas. They've got everything and anything that you need if you are gluten-free. They are amazing and locally owned here in Tucson. Make sure you give them a visit. Again, they are at 5845 North Oracle Road. Tell them Veronica from the Oversharing podcast send them so they know that we send you guys. So thank you so much, Gourmet Girls, for being a sponsor on the Oversharing podcast. It's the new year and the team at Pursuit Fitness is ready to help you reach all your health and wellness goals. With over 14 in-house personal trainers as well as an in-house PT, an amazing top-notch facility and modern equipment, you can be sure that you'll find a trainer that is a perfect match for you. We cannot wait to work alongside you in helping you reach your fitness goals this year. You can find Pursuit Fitness on Instagram at Pursuit Fitness AZ or call them directly and visit their website at pursuitfitnessaz.com. This episode of the Oversharing podcast is brought to you by About Me Hair Studio. With 2 amazing locations in Central and East Tucson, the About Me team is ready to style and serve you. Whether you need a new cut, color, or style, the amazing team at About Me is ready to make this experience all about you. Mention Podcast 10 and get 10% off your first service. I'm really excited to tell you guys all about Golden Roofing AZ. It is the perfect time to get your free roof inspections through the winter so you're not caught scrambling through the dreaded monsoon season. Golden Roofing offers services on any type of roof, tile, shingles, flat, and metal. Make sure you let them know you heard about them on the Oversharing podcast to receive 10% off your repairs. You can find them on Instagram at Golden Roof AZ or contact them directly with their website. All right, guys, we are back. Our next guest is a dedicated mindset coach and healing facilitator. She has traveled all over the world, from the sacred landscapes of Peru, learning about ancient plant medicine, and the beautiful beaches of Costa Rica, where she helped rebuild a national forest. She's a certified student of the science of healing and spiritual development, a mindset coach, yoga teacher, and meditation practitioner. With a strong emphasis in psychology, human behavior, and ancient practices, she bridges a gap between ancient wisdom and modern application. She's here to help all of us today, and she has helped me personally. Please welcome to the Oversharing podcast, Annelise Cherie. Woo!
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Thank you so much for coming. Yeah. I'm like starting to get comfortable.
I know.
I'm like, let's go, yo.
We got a lot to talk about.
I was just saying that you and me have met via FaceTime. So I feel like when I met you in person, like I have all these things to say, but I'm like, let me keep my mouth shut so we can talk about all of it on the podcast.
Yes.
How's your morning been?
It's been incredible. Just my normal morning routines, gym, all that stuff. And
yeah.
then here. So
what does your morning routine look like as someone who practices like a little bit of this therapy, breath work, trauma, all this fun stuff?
You know, it used to be extremely complex and I would overload myself with a million things in the morning. And after some time, I just really deducted it down to the most beneficial things for me, which is just meditation for 10 minutes and making sure that I get water and lemon first thing in the morning.
Oh, yes, girl.
And truly that simple. And I definitely try to stay off my phone as well, just for a little bit until I get myself going. So,
I feel like the phone thing is so hard hard, especially as someone that runs their own business.
It is. You're always on.
Always on. I've gotten a little bit better, but I'm really glad that you said that you've tried to minimize like the routine. Because more recently, I mean, I spoke to you back in December when we had our session, but more recently I realized that I was like really high strung again. I was like, what are you not doing? And I talked about this on the episode, I'm going to say last week, because this is airing on Tuesday. Sure. But I just like added everything in. And it worked for a few days. And there's things in all the routine that I'm like, these are the things that really make me feel better. So I need to simplify it so it doesn't seem like so much. Anytime someone starts someone new, I think that we go all in and then we're like, whoa.
100%. It's actually one of the quickest ways to burn yourself out and to actually not get into healthy routines and habits. If you overload yourself, you are sort of splitting your energy in so many directions that one, you're not even going to understand out of those things what is really benefiting you.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's too much.
Yeah.
You're naturally going to start to break that rapport with yourself and not show up fully to what you're committing to. Yeah. And I'm a big advocate of like undercommitting, over delivering, and not the opposite.
I love that. The trend in the past couple of weeks with a lot of my clients, for whatever reason, whether it's the weather, the energy, I feel like a lot of my clients feel super burnt out. And I always ask them, I'm like, what are you saying yes to that you could say no to? And that was also on the podcast last week. I talked about like saying either fuck yes or it's a no. And that's really hard. But we, all of us overcommit. We say yes to the party, yes to the event, yes to helping. And that was a big rude awakening. And I feel bad sometimes, but I also tell myself, yes, you feel bad, but you do feel better without having to overcommit.
It's the old paradigm. We have been conditioned as a society to hustle and grind and think that doing more will produce more. Mm-hmm. And we are in a new era where we're recognizing actually the cliche statement. Yeah. You know, working smarter, not harder. It's actually slowing down to speed up.
Yep. And you're also, you are producing more stress to your body, which is what we are here to talk about. I'm so excited. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you had a very interesting, amazing intro. It's like my favorite part where I get to highlight everything and then everyone's like, dang, I do all those things. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How did you get here? What is the story that got you to this moment right now?
It's such a long, complex story, so I'm going to try to break it down for the purpose of time. But essentially, I'm from Utah originally. I grew up in Florida and Arizona. I experienced an incredible amount of trauma as a kid, both with like abandonment issues and just in your family dynamic issues. And then on top of that, intense sexual trauma that was ongoing for a long period of time. And for most of my life, I ran from it, avoided it, did the typical, like, I'll just forget that this happened.
I'll wrap it up, put it in the box behind my head back there.
Exactly. And of course, like trauma or anything in life, all of it caught up to me about my mid-20s. And conventional therapy, although offered a lot of great benefit, just wasn't doing enough for me. And I knew that I didn't want to go on medication, no judgment to it. I just didn't want it for myself. So I heard about some alternative therapies, more ancient practices, and with the Shipibo tribe in Iquitos, Peru. I was like, sure, let me go try this. I went down there and I worked with various different plant medicines of all kind, some psychoactive, some non-psychoactive, and essentially was just put into isolation for 3 weeks, literally, and had to sit with myself and the Shipibo shaman to really work through some deep traumas. And there's 2 pillars that brought me on this path that I think are very important to highlight. To explain why I changed my entire life and now do this professionally. The first thing is through the different ancient practices that I was exploring, I really was shown the power of perspective and that life really is a result of the choices we make and the meaning that we assign it, right? Yeah. And that power actually resides within us. And as it relates to trauma specifically, I came to understand that I will never outrun this. Yeah. I will never forget what happened. It is part of what I am, but I can change the emotional relationship to it and the narrative that I have around it, meaning...
I'm so intrigued right now. I have like a gazillion questions, but I'm like sitting here like, oh my God.
Right. And so I really played around with this concept of like, I can't outrun this. I have to integrate it. I have to be okay with what occurred, but change the narration around it where it was in service to me and actually would become something that helps me in my life, not harms me anymore. And that intersection was life-changing, like recognizing that if I could just help people change their perspectives and their emotional relationship with their trauma, then they would start to get their power back. They would start to understand how to work with trauma as opposed to trying to heal it or get rid of it. It's not possible, right?
You can't get rid of it. That box back that's back there, it's always going to be there. I have so many questions already. First of all, what is it like to be in solitude in Peru? Like, what was that like? Is there like a lot of emotional toll? Is there like, are you eating? Are people coming in and out? Like, what is that like? Because I'm picturing right now a dark room with no food and just crying.
You're right.
What? I could never. First of all, the fact that you were like, let me just drop this whole thing and go to Peru, that is insane.
Yeah.
But in the best way, because now you, like what you said is like there was a purpose behind it, and you figuring out what you were doing is now providing a purpose and help to other people. It's going to make us all better.
Well, I hit an intersection where like the therapists and things that I was working with were sort of like, listen, like, you know, I think you need medication to help you just function in your day to day. And there was just something inside of me that was like,
no, that's not it.
Yeah, there's a different way. And again, I'm not putting that down. I think there's a time and a place for it. But something inside of me was like, there's another way. And it was my life's journey. It was my life purpose. And to be honest with you, part of the perspective adjustment was recognizing that everything that had happened to me really was perfect.
Yeah.
It was exactly how it was supposed to be. And there's no way I could have helped the amount of people that I have over the last 10 years had I not had to go through that journey myself first.
Yeah.
And as far as like the isolation Peru, you're right on the money.
It's literally what it was.
It was literally that. Yeah.
I feel like it takes a certain kind of like mental toughness, but I also feel that when we talk about mental toughness, that also coexists with like our perspective on life and like, is life working for me or against me? And I do feel like sometimes people are like, life is so against me. And those are the people that continuously fall over and over again. And that's a really hard pill to swallow.
Well, it brings to mind, you say mental toughness, and what I came to understand was actually surrender. It's courage, not tough.
Yeah.
And that diminishes that victim narrative of like, I need to survive and I need to be okay and I have to find strength and perseverance. And instead it's like this ultimate surrender of like, I let go. I don't
let it go.
I have to release. I have to just accept what is and begin the process of actually allowing myself to face this, feel it, see it. And it's not toughness, it's surrender.
Yeah. Do you feel like, because you say that this was something that kind of unraveled in your mid-20s, when we see trauma, which is what we're speaking a lot about today, and trauma comes up, why does it come up later? Like what is the coping mechanism that we use during it? Because I feel like sometimes things happen, like you see people that are like were sexually abused or had some kind of traumatic, mine included. I was a little delayed, but not as delayed as like so many years. And I'm glad that I didn't. We can talk a little bit about that. But when that happens years back, what is it that like unravels in our mid-20s or later in life that we understand? Is it just something that we're willing to then accept, or is it something that triggers, or is it because now you're adult and you're fully developed? Like, what is the science behind that?
There's seriously so many things I could touch on with that question because it's not just a singular thing. But what I want to highlight, I think the most important aspect of it is, especially with sexual trauma, oftentimes there's shame, disassociation, avoidance. And I always tell people our greatest ability as a human being is adaptability because we can integrate any experience and adapt to any situation, whether beautiful or toxic, right?
Yeah.
And so our adapting mechanism is sort of how we survive, how we exist within things. So for me specifically, and what I see a lot with my clients who experience trauma, is the disassociative component, creating narratives in the mind that almost convince themselves that this wasn't what it was.
Are you attacking me?
I am.
I'm bringing it out.
Yeah, so it's a disassociative and adaptive component that makes you think like, it's okay, I'm fine, this doesn't matter, this isn't impacting my life.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I lived so long being like, oh, it's okay, like I don't even need to think about it, I don't even talk about it, it's fine. And to get to the next part of that, basically, when you get older, why do you all of a sudden be like, wait a second?
Yeah, wait, did that really happen?
Yes.
And did it happen that way?
Exactly. It's because I always tell people in life, nobody gets out alive. We all came here to learn our lessons.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And essentially what happens is you're doing all of these or creating all of these unconscious behaviors, reactivities, triggers, all these behaviors and situations that are an extension of the issue. Mm-hmm. And so your life starts to reflect back to you what's happening in the internal environment. And the internal environment is the unconscious component.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're attracting abusive partners. All of a sudden, you're in unhealthy relationship dynamics. You have deep insecurity on all kinds of things, and you don't understand why. You're like, why is this my reality? Why am I in these situations? And it's at that crossing point where two things happen. You either get into that villain victim consciousness where you just constantly invest in that reality, or you shift into the space of, I need to look at this. I need to take responsibility for my involvement in this.
I love that. This has so many avenues. Before we move forward on this, so I do want to ask, you said, and this is, it could be, I guess it is a question. So you said that everything that happened up into your life was like, it was perfect because now this is where you're at now. And I think that really highlights what I've been saying. Also, a few things that have been trending on the podcast is like two things can be true. And it's like, could you have chosen this to be a different path and a different pathway to get to this point now? Absolutely. I wish we all never didn't have to deal with, trauma ever, but that's not what it was. Life happens. And then the outcome was now this, and I think that we forget that two things can be true at the same time when it comes to living our purpose, understanding, healing, like maybe not understanding, but knowing that on the double-edged sword of that is like, maybe I don't understand why it happened, but I can also find the positive in the action itself or the situation itself.
So you're actually describing an ancient philosophy, which is called the law of dichotomy. Okay. And essentially what that means, and we hear it in more Christian texts of like as above, so below, as within, as without. And essentially what it is that there's always going to be polarity in everything. And so in every situation, there will always be a positive. There will always be a negative. The power and where I feel like we have quote unquote control over life is not necessarily what happens to us, but how we respond to it. And so you're correct in the assumption that no matter what, there's always going to be an option to choose the positive perception or the negative perception.
Yeah.
That's where the personal empowerment comes in. Yep. And so, yes, is what happened to me and so many people often tragic and extremely real and painful? And are there a lot of negative components? Of course. But simultaneously, by the law of dichotomy, are there equally beautiful opportunities and perspectives and growth that's offered?
Learning opportunities. Yeah. I think that's one of the big things that I took from our session. And I will say, guys, like I sat with you back in December and we had talked a little bit about just having, because I think we were scheduled a little bit farther back and we had to reschedule. I can't remember if it was you or me, girlfriend. I'm so sorry. But before then, I knew that in 2025, I wanted to get into some kind of therapy, whether it was somatic therapy, traditional therapy, but I didn't know what I was trying to unpack at that point. And at that point, I hadn't had the miscarriage. And I remember, I think me and my husband had a good conversation, and at that point was like, I think it would be a good idea to talk to somebody. I was like, well, this kind of works out perfect because I also want to experience what you offer, how you relate to your clients, the kind of approach that you take before I have you come on the podcast. So I know what to ask and what to say and what we can dive deep into. And the biggest thing for me now, I mean, this was back 2-3 months ago. I think the biggest thing for me was acknowledging that there was trauma associated with it. And what you're saying is literally right on the money. Like I was failing to acknowledge that was something traumatic that happened in my life. And I'm so glad that I bit that bullet 1 month after the miscarriage and waiting so long, because I've always been mentally tough. I didn't think that life was unfair and that it was just happening to me. That's not where I was at. But my downfall in this healing process was not acknowledging that trauma had happened. So how do you pull that out of people? Like, are you going back and unpacking again when this trauma happened 15, 20 years ago? Are people very willingly being like, I think this is what happened? Or do you have to dig in and find what the source is?
So this gets into truly how I structure my sessions. And really just the simple answer is reconnecting people back to their truth. Okay.
And how do we do that?
We do that through creating a parasympathetic state in the nervous system, which means getting you into a calm, decompressed, regulated space where you are willing to accept truth, because truth can be challenging. We as a society and individually really we run
like,
from
nah,
it.
That didn't happen.
No, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And, so the way that I structure my sessions is first to get somebody into such a calm, peaceful space within them, a reconnection to themselves, that they're willing to tap in to the truth of what they're actually holding.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of start with the breath work, a little bit of the energy work to get you into that calm space, and then transition into the talking, right? Because at that point, you're more willing to really look at yourself, not you specifically, but anyone.
Yeah, I can look at myself.
And more willing to have those conversations. And the reality of it is, and this is what one of my teachers in Peru had taught me, like, your life is just going to be a result of the willingness of how much you're willing to look at truth.
Yeah. That was the other thing too, when we talked about like the double-edged sword and the positive and the negative and things happening to you and for you. And I remember telling you, I don't feel like this happened to me because you said to me, I said, I don't feel like this happened. How do I explain this? I think I said, I understand that this happens, but I also understand that if it had to happen to somebody, I could understand why it happened to me. And it wasn't in the context of like, I'm not healthy, I'm not doing the right things. It was in the context of like, people don't talk about this, and I will talk about it to create a space for somebody else to feel comfortable about miscarriage, to not feel alone, to not feel abandoned because nobody knew. So I understand that part of it. I think the hard part for me, and you also, you're like, the part of learning from the experience was, what is this trying to teach you? And what we came down to, you and me together, was like, you need to slow down. Yeah. And I think for years, people have told me to slow down, like being in too many places at once, or jumping from one task to the next because of the environment that we live in, because of the life that I've created. And although it's beautiful and wonderful and it has all these amazing things that I get to be a part of, there's also a downfall to that. And it's the part of not slowing down. And this sounds so cheesy, but even before I left the gym right now, I was like, okay, I'm going from the gym to the podcast. I sat in the car. I took 3 big deep belly breaths to like let my body relax. Like, we're not rushed. We are getting from one place to another, but we're relaxing. But the learning curve for me was that it was like, I need to slow down. And I feel like it's not just me, right? This is the world that we live in. We're always getting to the next place, doing the next thing, saying yes so often. So how do we fix that? Like, what is the first step in being able to be like, I need to take a step back. I need to not be in a hectic space all the time.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing I want to say, the way that the human mind works is that it's always going to create a memory based off of experience. And so you have to understand that we're always going to create a story around something. And so when you're in this cross point of working through what happened to you, you're going to create a narrative or a story around that, whether you do it intentionally or not. And that's going to store in your nervous system, in your mind, as something that happened.
Can you use me as an example?
So for example, it's like you had this miscarriage. The mind then needs to create some kind of story or meaning around it.
To make it make sense.
And if you're not intentional about that, then the meaning around it could be, my body's broken, I'm not healthy, I'm not okay.
Which I was there for a quick second until you pulled me out and you're like, I don't think that's it.
Exactly. And so then when you work with someone like me or whoever, it's, let's explore the other truths within the situation. And let's decide what this means to us, and let's store it that way. And that's going to give you a better reality, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing to what you just said is presence. it's not silly to sit in your car and take a moment and breathe for a few seconds, because that is what life is supposed to be. It's right now. It's not what it was 10 minutes ago. It's not what it's going to be an hour from now. It's right now. And all the information you need is right now. But we don't live presently as a species.
No.
We are constantly focused on what happened and all the stories around it, trying to make sense of where we are. Or we're debilitatingly anxious about all the things that are potentially ahead of us and what we have to address and deal with. And so creating practices to actually anchor yourself, ground yourself, and just be in the present day it's just like beyond integral to have a good life.
Yeah.
So
that's hard. I'm telling you, I get this from my mom too, because, and we all do it. Just think about the times like when you're getting ready, or like you have an outing, you have a dinner at 8. You're like, okay, that means I have to leave the house at 7:30, which means I need to start getting ready by 7:30, which means I need to shower at 6:30 to make sure my hair dry. Like, we're already always thinking about the next thing without really sitting in this moment right now.
Yeah.
I've tried to make it a little bit better, but it is hard. We're going to pick up right there. We're going to cut to a quick sponsorship. I need to change the wording on this, because every time I say cut to a quick, I'm like, blah, blah, blah. We're going to take a sponsorship break and we will be right back. All right, guys, you guys know that I have been gluten-free for a few years now. It was a hard transition at first, but that all changed when I met the owners of Gourmet Girls. They are amazing. They are located on North Oracle Road. They have a full gluten-free menu as well as an amazing bakery. I love their biscuits and gravy. And if you have a little bit of a sweet tooth, you gotta go in and check out their gluten-free cupcakes. Mine is definitely, my go-to is the carrot cake. And Ernie knows that when it comes to holidays and birthdays, he's got to go over there and get myself a sweet treat. They've got sourdough, pizza dough, gluten-free almond flour tortillas. They've got everything and anything that you need if you are gluten-free. They are amazing and locally owned here in Tucson. Make sure you give them a visit. Again, they are at 5845 North Oracle Road. Tell them Veronica from the Oversharing Podcast send them so they know that we send you guys. So thank you so much, Gourmet Girls, for being a sponsor on the Oversharing Podcast. It's the new year, and the team at Pursuit Fitness is ready to help you reach all your health and wellness goals. With over 14 in-house personal trainers, as well as an in-house PT, an amazing top-notch facility, and modern equipment, you can be sure that you'll find a trainer that is a perfect match for you. We cannot wait to work alongside you in helping you reach your fitness goals this year. You can find Pursuit Fitness on Instagram at Pursuit Fitness AZ, or call them directly and visit their website at pursuitfitnessaz.com. This episode of the Oversharing Podcast is brought to you by About Me Hair Studio. With 2 amazing locations in Central and East Tucson, the About Me team is ready to style and serve you. Whether you need a new cut, color, or style, the amazing team at About Me is ready to make this experience all about you. Mention Podcast 10 and get 10% off your first service. I'm really excited to tell you guys all about Golden Roofing AZ. It is the perfect time to get your free roof inspections through the winter so you're not caught scrambling through the dreaded monsoon season. Golden Roofing offers services on any type of roof, tile, shingles, flat, and metal. Make sure you let them know you heard about them on the Oversharing Podcast to receive 10% off your repairs. You can find them on Instagram at Golden Roof AZ or contact them directly with their website. We'll pick up somewhere. Yeah. All right. I think we left off. I don't know. We'll move on. It's okay. I did really want to talk about the healer's trap, because I always tell myself that I do a really good job. Like, I tell myself that I'm very self-aware, and I feel like that's like a good and bad trait, because just because I think I'm self-aware, it doesn't mean that I don't want to beat someone's ass in a parking lot sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So I feel like when I tell myself I'm self-aware, then I am almost like self-prescribing, self-diagnosing, self-healing. Mm-hmm. Hold on. Let me call my... Hey, yo, I'm recording a podcast. I'll call you right back. Sorry. That's my brother. Thanks. Sorry.
Like, come babysit my kids.
Come babysit my kids, please.
Okay, so to answer the question, well, firstly, I just want to say, to be the animal with the higher mind, which means you don't be that person that's constantly joy chasing and trying to just be this enlightened being all the time. That's not true. It's not realistic. It's not honest. It's not authentic. We are animals. We're going to be triggered. We have the human
emotions.
Yes. Like, we're emotionally complex beings. So that's the first thing I want to say. The healer's trap. Wow. Okay.
First of all, what is the healer's trap? Let's start there because I mean, I don't know what the healer's trap is. I'm assuming that I think I know because, again, self-aware and trying to self-diagnose and I'm just trying to do the thing.
So the healer's trap is a phrase I coined a while ago because I'd started to see a huge increase with the growth of coaching and therapy in the last 5 years. Just so many people getting stuck constantly looking at their problems and not really integrating the things that they were learning in sessions with coaches or therapists or plant medicine or whatever it might be. And they're just like data chasing, just constantly looking for problems and never being in their life. And that's not okay. There's so much more around it because there's another component with like social media and just all of these like spiritual influencers and all these things. And I sort of relate it to, just because this is how my mind works, always like looking to ancient texts and teachings and wisdom to kind of apply it to where we are now. And if you look a lot of history, like there's always these references of great floods that come and sort of annihilate intelligent cultures and bring them down. And I had this come into meditation a while ago where it's like we're actually in a great flood right now, but it's not water, it's information. And we are drowning in an overstimuli of you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do this and you have to do this to be okay. And
without finding the source.
Correct. It's all external.
Yeah.
So it's like we're drowning in this trap of looking for the answers outside of us instead of getting into yourself and going on the journey and exploration of, no, there is no such thing as a correct way or an incorrect way. You have to find your way.
Yeah.
And, this is where it's so important because that gets us out of the old paradigm of like this dogmatic, like righteousness of like, it has to be this way or it's wrong. It's like, no, find your truth. Yeah. Find your center. What works for you? What doesn't work for you?
That's so hard too because I'm a TikTok girly. I love my TikTok. But you can get on a TikTok once a month around my period and convince me it's time to divorce my husband because I'm literally caught on an algorithm. But also when I go into like these cycles of like trying to figure things out, guilty. I literally just did this last week where my cycle was like super short. So I was like, something's not right. So what's wrong? Luckily, I was able to pull myself out a little bit to understand that this all has to do with like my nervous system and my cortisol levels. And it's like, there are some topical things you can do. There are some supplements you can take. But I was like, no, there's a deeper root. Yep. So I feel like when we're on social media, we're just so easily, again, flooded by all the information, which is wonderful. But two things can be true. And it means, yes, this is great that we live in a world where we have everything at the palm of our fingertips, but it's also how much are you taking in and how much is that influencing the way that you respond, what you believe, and what you think the problem is versus like the root cause,
Yeah, and that gets into the difference of like connecting to your true instinct, your true self, and using your discernment, your own discernment of what feels right for you and what doesn't feel right for you. It's okay to try things. It is amazing that we have such an influx of information available, but law of dichotomy, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with an influx of information, which means as that increases, our connection to ourself and our truth has to also increase. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to drown.
Yeah. But I don't feel like you said, I don't feel like that's true. I feel like the information is increasing and our relationship to ourselves seems like it's decreasing because we're putting all of our value into what we're learning online and not really digging deep. It's like,
You're pointing to why I have a job.
Yeah. You're like, and this is why I have a job.
Because you're right. People, and this is where we're falling out of alignment, right? Because the increase is occurring, technology is rising, which I don't have an issue with this. Again, positives, negatives, it's how we use it that matters. And our connection to self is decreasing. So there's a misalignment going on in our society. And it's not okay.
You're like, it's going to ruin us.
Well, what is increasing is the signaling, right? Yeah. Because dis-ease in the body will increase, not because life is this terrible, difficult thing, but it's our body's way of communicating to us. Like our emotions are an intelligent mechanism telling us something, right? Yeah. It's just we try to run away from them, suppress them, avoid them. But in this case, what is increasing is depression, anxiety, dissociative tendencies, a lack of purpose and direction.
You said dissociative tendencies, and that rings with me because everyone is so comfortable with being behind a screen, being this person who they think they are behind a closed wall. And then you get into real life and you're like, ooh, you are nothing like that.
Yeah, it's easy to lose your authenticity.
That's a good segue. And I really wanted to dig into this because you said something a little bit earlier that I was like, oh man, this is going to be a good segue of conversation. Is you said something about things keep showing up in our life until we learn the lesson. Like you use the example of like dating shitty people. You didn't say shitty. I said shitty. Dating shitty people. And I want to talk about this so bad because I have so many amazing friends. And I always tell people like a lot of my amazing, successful friends are single. And some of them have bad dating tendencies. I feel like they've gotten better, but I want to learn more about that association, how we can help. I want to know how I can help as a friend. And I want to know that anybody that listens to this podcast right now is dating shitty men and continues to find shitty men can figure out how they're going to date better men. Hit me, sister.
Everyone, you're going to hate me for what I'm about to say, but it's true. And it's where I turned my entire dating life around. As you can imagine, my relationship with men was fucked.
So bad.
So I had to stop focusing on the choices and behaviors of the men I was choosing and what pain was that was being created. And I had to start looking at myself and asking, why am I choosing to be here?
And to be okay with this.
Yes, that's where it changes. So you have to understand who you're dating is a reflection of you. And so it's confronting because then you start looking at your partner and it's revealing one of two things. Either where you are not loving yourself, where you are disrespecting yourself, where you're playing small and where you are saying that that's okay. Or it's highlighting aspects of your own perception of what you consider love to be or your own same issues that you hold and your own same values that align with that person.
Man.
Yeah.
That's like a knife and a twist.
So it's about you.
Yeah, it's all about you, girl.
Yeah.
I think we forget to ask ourselves questions. And speaking, I've been with my husband almost 8 years now. We've been married for 2. But even in some of like my toxic tendencies, like I try to ask myself, why am I like this? Or why, I'm such a love me, hug me, touch me. Like, yes, that's my love language. Why? Because my dad was not like that. My dad was very like, there was a very clear line between father-daughter. He never wanted to feel like he didn't ever want to feel like he patted my back and accidentally, touched me inappropriately or, and I understand that as an adult, but that did some things, and it's not terrible because I can assess and understand where that is coming from. But how did you, because you had a bad relationship with men before. You've been with your boyfriend now for a year. You guys are super sweet together, traveling the whole wide world. Love all the content that you guys post. But what was the switch? Like, was it going to Peru or are there things that you had to put in place? And I want to emphasize this because I don't like giving people an answer without things that you could start doing right now that are going to shift your perspective and get you out of fucked up situations.
Yeah. So honestly, I should and could write an entire book about it because it's such a lengthy answer to that. But if I were to try to simplify it down, yes, plant medicine was a massive part in it, but it goes back to the concept of the mirror, right? And so recognizing that I was almost looking at my relationship dynamics through the victim construct of like, why does this always happen? Why me? Why do I always end up in abusive situations? And what the plant medicine and just my teachers helped me understand was I need to stop looking outside of me and look within me of why I'm allowing it. I mean, it really is. If there's one thing you could start today, it's that.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like? You don't have to use yourself, but like just a general example. So I feel like people find commonalities when somebody actually speaks it and then they're like, oh, I'm doing that.
Yeah. So you have to first, I will use myself as an example. the first thing is if you're in a relationship that isn't feeling healthy in whatever way, right? Like whether you feel insecure in it or like they're clearly abusive or whatever, the first thing to ask yourself is, what part of me is afraid to like leave? Why? What part of me believes that I'm supposed to be here or that
and deal with this?
Yeah, that it's okay for me to tolerate this. That question is going to start to lift up the rug and look underneath. And that's where the work really begins, is asking why. Like, what part of me thinks that this is the best I can do?
Yeah. And the answer can be as far as, this is what my mom was okay with. It can be as, I didn't have a father figure, so I'm assuming that this figure that I have is the only thing I have close to like a male interaction, or correct me if I'm wrong. That's where I'm assuming this is kind of like lifting up that blanket of like, why? Why do I think that this is okay?
Yeah. And it sometimes isn't just, you're totally right, but it sometimes isn't just connected to your home dynamics or your dad dynamics. It also very much can just be learned behavior, as you said, from the mom, observing like where she stayed small, where she was putting her value in the wrong things. You know, I see a lot of the time women sort of placing their survival or their needs on the wrong things and not like putting it more on external securities instead of internal securities.
Yeah.
Do I feel emotionally safe? Do I feel actual love? Do I feel at home in this environment? Or do I feel like I need to be here to survive, to be okay?
Yeah.
You know, another really big one that I find women doing, and men can do it too, is just trying to create a purpose through their relationship. Like, this is my purpose, as opposed to doing that work of figuring out their own autonomy and independence is another big trap that people get in.
I think that's in it. I feel like that kind of coexists with the fact of like you, and I say this to my husband, and I don't know if it's the right way to say it or if it's contradicting, but I always tell myself, I've used this forever, and I'll coin this one, is I can't take care of we if I don't take care of me.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the beginning, is like being able to really sit with yourself, what it is that your priorities, what are the things that are important to you.
Yeah.
And how showing up for yourself is then going to create this version that can then show up for others.
Well, this is what's fascinating. And it took me a while to learn this. And when I did, it's when my life did change. Now I'm in the greatest relationship ever, like totally the luckiest girl. And it's when I realized that we actually train and teach people how to treat us. And that blew my mind.
I love that so much.
Yeah, where I started to recognize like, oh, like how I'm loving or not loving myself is not only sending maybe I have some conscious awareness, but it's all the unconscious ways that I'm not loving myself, all the unconscious ways that I am displaying a lack of self-respect and value that is literally showing my counterpart
that's okay.
That's okay.
Or that's the bare minimum.
Correct.
That is, I mean, I love that you shared all that, because I feel like of all the things that we've really talked about today, I feel like that's so important. I always try to tell people, you can't give if you can't give to yourself, you know? And I feel like what you said is like, we are a reflection of the way that we let people treat us, the boundaries that you set, the things that you are okay with, the positions that you put yourself in or allow people to put you in, says a lot about what you're going to be okay with and what people are going to keep doing.
Yeah. I mean, you're constantly in life revealing your cards about how you truly care about yourself or not.
1000%. I feel like the biggest thing with that, guys, sorry if you feel attacked, but this is a good learning curve, is situationships. Like, I always tell people, like, I have a friend who, you know, was on a like no strings attached time deal. And I was like, you can do whatever you want, but just make sure it is what it is. And when you start catching feelings, you can't be upset at that, because this person literally told you that they don't want a relationship. You are allowing that. Oh, and then it's like a whole unraveling thing.
That is so real. And it actually reminds me of a few years ago, I was in Peru. You do plant medicine inside of these temples called malokas. And I was working with a cactus, San Pedro. And when you're in those altered states, you actually auditory, like you hear and see, like as real as you and I are talking. And I was sitting in the Maloka, and the medicine was like, we need to talk about your love life, your relationships. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, shit. Is that cactus talking to me about my love life?
And it was like,
I love this.
It was so crazy. But it was like, before I show you what the issue is, I first need to tell you something. Are you ready? And I was like, yeah. And the medicine goes, it's all your fault. And I was like,
ouch.
Oh God. Like, I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, let me show you. And then like he projected this, he being this cactus, his masculine energy, projected this image out in front of me where it was like showing me everyone I'd ever talked to, dated, situationship, you name it. And I
need to get on this medicine.
Yeah.
I want to try it.
Yes, it's amazing. But it was like, here's the thing about love. It's very simple. If you like someone, let them know the level of interest that you have in them. If it's reciprocated, fantastic.
Wonderful.
Keep going. If it's not,
run.
Walk away.
No, run. Run away.
Yeah. And it's like the moment that you don't, you're effectively playing the game.
Yeah.
You're now in the cat and mouse game. And he was just like, you have to then ask yourself, has what you've been doing, because you're sitting here saying like, I want love, I want a relationship, like complaining, being the victim. And he's like, but none of your actions are actually choosing love.
Oh, I love this so much.
You're choosing a game.
Yeah.
And so if you want love, then you need to choose it and walk away from anything that's not it.
Yeah. I love that you said that in the perspective of your work. And I always tell people in the perspective of my work, love and dating, I will say I got extremely lucky. I met my husband at work, and most people, you know, you have to work for it. You can't say I want to get married, have kids, do the whole thing, but also spend every weekend at home on your couch not being intentional, or getting on the dating apps and not being intentional about what it is that you are looking for. If you are literally looking for a long-term relationship and you put in your freaking bio, oh, I'm just looking for a good time, girl, you gonna have a good time, but you ain't gonna find a husband. Like it's like everything else. There is practices that have to go behind the things that you want.
Well, it gets back to that container of truth. Are you being honest with yourself? Are the things that you say you want in alignment with the actions and disciplines that you're taking? If they're not, then that is like the definition of misalignment.
Yeah.
Like
you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. You're just running in circles at that point.
Yeah.
And so
I could talk about dating all day. Yeah. I do want to talk a little bit about the difference between traditional and non-traditional therapy, what you do. I had a really great experience, cannot emphasize that enough, but I also want to know about the differences, because everybody knows what therapy, or they think they know what therapy is, not knowing that there are these alternatives and different routes that they can take. So what's the main difference?
Well, the main difference truly is a certification.
Yeah.
You know, it's like traditional therapists, one, they can legally diagnose mental health conditions. They can prescribe medications if you're a psychiatrist. They can refer you out to other things. And so and they're also extremely regulated under certain practices and all of that. The thing with like coaches, more what I do, alternative therapies, is it has a lot more to do with mindfulness, spirituality, regulation of nervous system. And there are crossovers. I know plenty of clinical psychologists that do both. And so it does exist. But I just sort of remind people all the time, like, they're both beneficial. It's very important for you to ask yourself, like, what is the purpose of you seeking out help? Like, are you looking to discover a diagnosis, or are you looking to
heal it?
To heal it.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Yeah.
And so, of course, I don't want to minimize. Like I said, I know a lot of therapists that do both.
Yes.
In fact, I considered going back to school and getting my actual psychology degree. And this trade school that I go to in Hawaii is run by two world-renowned psychologists, and there's tons of psychiatrists and psychologists in the class with me.
Yeah.
And I would talk to them about it and being like, you know, I really just want those credentials and da-da-da-da. Every single one of them was like, why? Like, literally,
it's like it's almost like you're doing the same thing.
Yes, like, we're here because we've recognized that true change happens on an unconscious somatic level. It's through experiencing certain concepts, not just talking about certain concepts. And it reminds me of my favorite quote, which is, knowledge is just rumor until the body knows it.
Oof.
And
love that.
Yeah, like we've come to understand that true change happens on an unconscious level, not conscious level. And typically, not always, traditional therapy works more with the conscious mind.
Yeah.
Whereas unconventional therapies work more with somatics and the unconscious mind.
Yeah. I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I saw you, because I feel like when you think about therapy, I think about Freaky Friday. Have you seen the movie
Yes.
Freaky Friday? When he's like, and how do you feel about that? And he's like doodling like all this crazy shit. And I was like, is that what it's going to be like? That was nothing what it was like. I mean, I feel like we do get right. Like I don't know how much it takes to like really open somebody up. I feel like I'm such an open book, and I'm like, word vomit, here we go. This is what's happening. But I didn't feel like it was, it almost felt like it was just like a conversation with a friend, you know?
Yep.
The reason I found you was because of our mutual friend, Shauna.
Yes.
Shout out to Shauna. And she was, when I asked her what it was like, she was telling me that it was for her more of like, goals and intentions, and almost like a way of creating patterns for whatever goals she had in her life or that week. So can you talk a little bit about like more of like not so much a traumatic therapy, or something that's more like of evolving of life in a positive way? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's like the way that I structure my sessions is to first get someone into that calm space, that reconnected space where they can start to really discover what they're actually seeking. Is that truly in alignment with their values and their needs? And then that leads into more, like you said, the talking to the friend, like the discussion components. Oftentimes we do meditations, visualizations to reinforce what we're discussing. But for someone that's not experiencing deep trauma, which I have a lot of clients that just come for support
Coaching,
and guidance. Yeah. It's just helping you become aware of what we talked about earlier. Like, are my choices and my quote unquote plan in alignment with the things I say I'm seeking?
Yeah.
And so it's just creating an organization in the perception and finding better perspectives, more solution-oriented perspectives of like, okay, you say you want to have your own business, but
what are you doing?
Yeah, look at all the ways that you're prohibiting that, and you're not even conscious to that. And so instead, I invite you to look at it this way, or think of it that way, or have that uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Yeah.
And so
I love that.
it's just creating solutions and strategies to help people be more intentional and clear about the direction that they're taking, the actions that they're implementing. And a lot of the times what I found is sometimes people will come in there thinking that they know what they're there for. And through the process, we'll just get to something so much deeper and recognize, like, actually, this is what's really this is why you're getting stuck.
Yeah. I mean, me included, I feel like I was going into, unpack a little bit, but I feel like I went in thinking that I needed to understand how to move past it instead of sitting there and realizing what I needed to learn from it.
Yes.
And that is the story of life. It's like, it's not exactly what you need to move past, but how you're going to take this story, this thing that happened, this event in your life, and change the trajectory of your life as a learning opportunity.
Exactly.
Which was a big thing for me.
I always tell people, like, Earth is just a school. We're here to learn.
Earth is a school, and we're here to learn.
Yeah.
The School of Earth.
The School of Earth.
I love that so much. I think that is a really good place to end. I am so grateful that you came today. Can you please tell everybody where they can find you, how they can inquire about services, all that fun stuff before we leave?
Yes, my website is annelisemindset.com. My Instagram is Annelise Cherie, which you guys can, I'm sure, find the text to spell
And
that.
it's also in the episode summary today.
Yes. Those two areas. Also, I'm on Insight Timer, which is a free meditation app where you can get all of my free meditations. And I will be dropping them on YouTube, which is also Annelise Cherie, and Spotify probably in April. So
I love that. We are talking about her getting on the start of her podcast tour. So I'm sure if you guys follow her, you'll be able to find some more tangible nuggets on some other episodes. Maybe we can have you back in the future and talk a little bit more.
I would love that so much.
Thank you.
For having me.
You bet. Thanks so much for coming. It was amazing.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I am definitely about 3 marks deep in Mexico right now. I will see you guys next week. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the fun things that helps our podcast grow. We love having these conversations. Lots of amazing guests coming up April, May. So make sure you guys always tune in. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you guys next week.